I know who killed JonBenet. There's no doubt in my mind who killed JonBenet.
Hello there everybody, this is Nancy Drew with the Nancy Drew channel, and today's episode is about Detective Linda Arndt's day on December 26th. And would you believe that John Ramsey killed JonBenet if you were in her shoes? So let's recount that day.
He said there's been a kidnapping. It involves a 6-year-old girl. There was a ransom note, a 2.5-page ransom note. And according to the ransom note, there was going to be a phone call from the author, and they were supposed to call between 8 and 10 a.m. So I was supposed to get to the house for purposes of monitoring the phone call.
I went to the Boulder Police Department and obtained a handheld tape recorder as well as my notebook. I briefly met with Officer Carl Veach. Veach informed me that he had the ransom note. I requested that Veach make 3 copies of this note. I retained possession of one of the copies. Another copy was given to Detective Patterson, and the 3rd copy was placed in a sealed envelope and left on my desk. I quickly reviewed the contents of this 3-page note. Detective Patterson and I then responded to the Ramsey residence. Prior to arriving at the residence, we met with Sergeant Paul Reichenbach. We met with Sergeant Reichenbach at the rear of the Basemar Shopping Center at approximately 7:55 a.m. Reichenbach personally provided us with the following additional information. Reichenbach said there was a light dusting of snow on the ground when he arrived at the Ramsey residence. Reichenbach did not notice any footprints or any other tracks in the snow. Reichenbach personally checked the exterior of the Ramsey residence. Reichenbach did not notice any signs of forced entry to the residence. The first officer on the scene was Officer Rick French. French had told Reichenbach that something didn't seem right. The 6-year-old daughter of John Ramsey, JonBenet Ramsey, had been kidnapped from her bedroom sometime between 10 p.m. on December 25th and 6 a.m. on December 26th. Officer French told me there was no apparent forced entry to the Ramsey home. French had checked the Ramsey home and had not detected any sign of JonBenet. 4 friends of the Ramseys had been notified by the Ramseys of JonBenet's disappearance and were currently at the house. The pastor from the Ramseys church had also been notified and was also present at the house. Victim crime advocates had been notified and were also present inside the Ramsey home. There were 2 cellular phones at the Ramsey house when Detective Patterson and I arrived. These cellular phones were used to make phone calls from the Ramsey residence. The telephone at the Ramsey house was not used to make outgoing phone calls on the morning of December 26. The cellular phones belonged to John Ramsey and John Fernie. I asked John Ramsey for the location of the phones in the house on the 1st floor. John showed me a telephone mounted on the wall at the west end of the kitchen and a telephone located in the den. The den is located west of the kitchen. I connected the tape recorder to the telephone located in the den. I informed Mr. Ramsey that if the author of the ransom note called, we would be able to tape record the conversation. I had asked John if the doors to the house had been locked when the family went to bed last night. John told me that he personally checked all of the doors and all the windows in the home this morning. All the doors and windows were locked. John told me that although the house does have an alarm system, the family had not used the alarm system for months. This is what Patsy told Detective Arndt 2 hours after she spoke to Officer French. Patsy said that she had gone down the stairs from her bedroom to the kitchen. Patsy used the back stairway. At the bottom of this spiral staircase, Patsy discovered a 3-page handwritten note. The note had been written on legal-size paper. Patsy said she originally thought the note might have been left by her housekeeper. After Patsy looked at the note and read it, she ran to JonBenet's room, and JonBenet was missing. I returned to the den area of the house. Each time the telephone rang, I was present when John Ramsey answered the telephone. There were at least 3 times when John Ramsey was not present in the den when the phone rang. I personally saw John Ramsey run to the den to answer the phone. For each incoming phone call received at the Ramsey house on the morning of December 26th, John told me that the caller was not associated with the suspected ransom note. Now, if you were Linda Arndt, wouldn't you find it odd that John Ramsey wasn't even in the den to answer the telephone between that 8 and 10 a.m. time period for at least 3 of the telephone calls? He had to run to the room to answer the telephone. You don't think that John Ramsey could have just sat in the den for the whole 2 hours and waited, that it wasn't important enough? Now, one of the first things that Detective Linda Arndt spoke to John Ramsey about was how to handle the ransom telephone call. And what I thought I would do here is put what she wrote in a report and what John Ramsey wrote in his book about that call, so you can see the differences for yourself. But what I noticed was that Linda Arndt says the authors, because she didn't know if it was one or more than one kidnapper, where John just says one kidnapper. Now, in John's book, he writes, keep him on the phone. But in Linda Arndt's notes, it doesn't say anything about keeping him on the phone, because they had a trace on the phone. It didn't matter how long the kidnapper or kidnappers talked to John Ramsey. John Ramsey told me that he and his family had been at a dinner party held at the Fleet White home on the afternoon and evening of December 25th. John and Patsy, Burke, and JonBenet had returned at approximately 10 p.m. John told me that Patsy and Burke immediately went to bed. John had read a book to JonBenet, tucked her into bed, and then John went to bed. John said he went to bed at approximately 10:30 p.m. Earlier that morning, Officer Rick French said something similar. Ramsey family had been at a friend's house on the late afternoon and evening of December 25th. They returned home at approximately 10 p.m. JonBenet and her brother Burke went to bed shortly after the family returned home. John Ramsey had read to JonBenet after she had gone to bed and before she went to sleep. JonBenet had last been seen wearing a red turtleneck and white long underwear. While I was in the den, the pastor told me about a telephone conversation Patsy had had with her mother. Patsy's mother had spoken with the housekeeper, while Patsy's mother had been living in the Ramsey home. Miss Hoffman had reportedly said that JonBenet was so cute that someone would kidnap her. I met with Patsy and asked her about her telephone conversation with her mother. John Ramsey paced between the area of the den and the formal dining room. John was usually by himself. I did not see John or Patsy interact with each other. No one in the house made any obvious comment to me that it was after 10 a.m. and the suspected kidnappers had not called. I had placed my copy of the suspected ransom note on the table in the den and had asked John to review the note. I had asked John Ramsey to tell me what unusual things he detected from reading the note. John Ramsey said very little. There were 2 phone calls received by John Ramsey when I saw him act differently than he had all morning. When he received each of these phone calls, John stood in front of the north door located between the den and the kitchen. John looked outside during the phone call. John told the caller that JonBenet had been kidnapped. John was sobbing and had difficulty speaking. At times, John was unable to speak. I was told by friends the identity of the 2 callers. One caller was John Ramsey's son, John Andrew Ramsey, and the other caller was John Ramsey's daughter, Melinda Ramsey. John Ramsey told me that he is the president and CEO of Access Graphics. There was an article in the Boulder Daily Camera newspaper within this past month about Access Graphics. John informed me that Access Graphics has business offices located in Mexico City, Mexico, and Amsterdam. At an unknown time between approximately 10:40 and noon, John Ramsey left the house and picked up the family's mail. I was not present when John left. I did witness John Ramsey opening his mail in the kitchen. And so isn't it suspicious that John Ramsey would be opening up like his electric bill and other pieces of mail that he received? He later said that he was looking for a note from the ransomer. Patsy was asked about the ransom note. She spoke up, and here's what she said. Patsy did not know why someone would ask for the amount of $118,000. She said that amount had no significance to her. She asked me why the author of the note had not asked for a larger sum of money, or at least a round sum of money. So I would think that Detective Art would be thinking the same thing. Why was the ransom amount so small? I then spoke to John Ramsey. I suggested to John Ramsey that he and Fleet White check the house from top to bottom to see if anything belonging to JonBenet had been taken or had been left behind. I talked with John Ramsey in the kitchen of the house. After I spoken to John, he immediately went to the basement door. I saw Fleet following John Ramsey. Fleet yelled for someone to call an ambulance. I followed Fleet to the basement door. The door to the basement was wide open. I was standing in the hallway facing the door to the basement when I saw John Ramsey coming up the final 3 or 4 steps. John was carrying a young girl in his arms. The young girl had long blonde hair. John Ramsey was carrying the young girl in front of him, using both of his arms to hold her around her waist area. The young girl's head was above John Ramsey's head while he was carrying her. John said that he then grabbed JonBenet and carried her upstairs. One of the first things John told me after he came into the living room and had covered JonBenet's body was, "It has to be an inside job." John told me I was right. It had to be someone who knew the family. John told me that no one knows about the wine cellar in the basement, and therefore it had to be an inside job. I told John Ramsey to go back to the den where the other persons in the house were congregated. I told John Ramsey to phone 911 and have detectives and a coroner respond. I told John Ramsey to go to Patsy. But what happened was John left the room and then he immediately came back and he did not call 911 as he was told to do so. At approximately 1:40 p.m., Detective Bill Palmer told me that he overheard a phone conversation made by John Ramsey. John Ramsey was making arrangements to fly to Atlanta either that afternoon or that evening. Well, this ends this episode of Unsolved, and please leave a comment. What do you think? If you were Linda Arndt, would you think John was responsible for JonBenet's death?